So when it comes to eating for the winter, just like there's cycles every day, there's going to be cycles that's right, every year. If you said year, then you're right. If you said something else, I cannot be certain if you're right or not. Just like there's cycles in the day, there's cycles in the year. So let's just, like we did it before, why not? There's actually 6 seasons, and we're going to have you guys guess what dominates the 6 seasons. In the West, we usually think there's just 4 seasons, isn't it? Usually we're just familiar with like what summer, autumn, winter, spring, something like that. In India and in a lot of Asian countries, it's kind of common knowledge that there's actually 6 seasons because, I mean, frankly, anyway, I don't have to go so much into the details. I think you guys understand these things. I'll leave it to you if you have questions that you want to explore this deeper. But what are roughly, what are like the months? And obviously, if we're breaking the year 12 months into 6, that's going to be 2 months per each section. What months are going to be dominated by what doshas? Who knows? I'll give you a hint. What's the hottest time of the year? Yeah, so June, July, right around there. And again, keep in mind, it's going to change a little bit depending on where you're at. But yeah, June, July, that general time, sometimes it'd be like July, August, and that span, that's going to be the hottest, which means just like Jatami throwing, yeah, the fall, those fall months, which again, think of it in terms of, yeah. I like how descriptive you are, Jatami. Like I can understand your just through your screen. There's going to be a dominance in Vata. It's windy, it's dry, just like winter time. It's going to be a dominance and everything's going to be colder, heavier, like this. So accordingly, each season is going to have different effects as well. So in winter, what are going to be the, what is the dosha that's going to tend to want to go out of alignment the most? Yeah, so depending on the exact time of the year, it's going to be kapha or it's going to be vata for the most part. Depends on where you're at. For instance, here in Southern California, we have to be a little bit more cautious of vata, whereas some of you in the North Pole have to be a little bit more cautious of kapha. In general, the seasons are going to have major elements, but it also is going to depend on where in the world you are. For the most part, we actually want to look at kapha because it's a very heavy time of the year. I mean, everyone knows it's like you get bundled up and you hide in winter, start to hibernate. Depending on where you are in the world, and also there's a transition. Keep in mind, it's like in the winter, for most places in the world, you experience winters at least like 4 months. So it's actually like 2 different seasons. It's actually like a kapha and a vata, both. So, but for the most part, just to keep in mind that you want to counteract the particular elements of where you're at. So first, before we move on, does this make sense? So you see how that we're giving general principles. We have to specify it every time. Everything needs to be qualified in Ayurveda. Nothing's just black and white. So if it's very cold and dry where you're at, then guess what qualities of food you want to eat? I'll give you a hint. What about warm and wet? If it's very I mean, I'm even thinking some of you might be right on the equator, in which case even the winter time is still quite hot and muggy. What are the kind of qualities of food you might want to eat? Yeah. Again, I know these questions I'm asking might seem really trivial, but it's just making sure that you guys feel really comfortable with how Ayurveda works in terms of we want to balance everything. We want to bring in complementary elements to balance. So when it comes to how to eat in the winter, you want to look at your imbalances and first look at that, but you also want to look at nature's currents to make sure that you're not doing anything that's going to be too I mean, destructive sounds a little heavy, but destructive ultimately, you know. So the first thing we want to look at I mean, I just kind of, this is a long answer to a short question, actually. The first thing I want to look at is first balancing what you need from your skin inwards. As long as nature is not throwing a wrench in it. So for instance, if you have a lot of vata disturbance in your body and you need to balance vata, but then you travel to Costa Rica, where it's very hot, very muggy, it might be easier for your body. You might not have to exclusively eat a very vata pacifying diet. Nature might automatically take care of you. You start to poop better, you start to feel better, your skin starts to brighten up, everything starts to work a little bit better. It could be that simple. Usually we still want to eat in such a way that will balance everything from the skin inwards. So that's the first thing. Other than that, though, is eat locally. Surely do all that as well, but use nature's currents to help. So that's one principle we want to talk about. Number one, how do you know that your imbalances are balanced? The proof of the pudding is in the tasting. Yeah, it's actually, health is quite easy to perceive. You don't hear anyone complain when they're healthy. They're not like, oh, I'm so healthy right now. You hear a lot of people complain when they're not healthy. Health is perceived. You can, and some of the key ways to note is, number one is look at your digestion, your body's ability to digest. And how should you feel after you eat food? Exhausted and need to take a nap, right? Wrong. Energized, it's fuel. Literally, food's just biofuel. It's like literally designed to keep you going, to keep you living. It's the fuel for the body. So when you eat, you feel good. You feel energized after. You feel hungry for your meals. There's so many aspects of digestion. We're going to get a lot of the specifics right now, but number one, look at your digestion. Number two, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel it in your body. You're not going to feel inflammation. You're not going to feel your complexion is going to be beautiful in terms of vibrancy, in terms of not, again, it's like we'd have to give the opposite of what it would be to indicate what it is with health. It's like you don't have pimples. You're not constipated. It's like ultimately when the body's working well, you'll know, you'll be able to tell. However, it's something to always balance. I don't encourage anyone to think in terms of, wow, man, once I get balance. It's like, no, it's always going to be a balance. So don't worry, because most of us are never going to experience for a long period of time in terms of like years or decades, like sustainable, fantastic health, because that's just not what the material world's meant for. The material world's meant to shake us and make us realize this isn't our home eternally. We're only in this body for a couple of days anyway, maybe a couple of years, maybe a couple of decades. And ultimately, this material energy is moving in such a way as to help us transcend this material energy and try to actually not make this our eternal home, because it's not. You can't stay here long anyway. So the material world is designed in such a way as you're going to be afflicted by birth, death, disease, and old age. It's inevitable. We just want to do our best to keep the biomechanical robot moving and functioning as well as possible and balancing it to the best of our ability. But don't worry, you're never going to be able to perfectly balance it anyway, because that's just not what a material body does. There's always going to be some issues. You get perfect and then something, and you stub your toe. And then who knows what happens. So the big thing is just as long as you're always adamant and flexible to balancing. That's the main meditation I encourage everyone to think about, is how to balance whatever is imbalanced right now. Frankly, if you feel that way about most aspects of your life, you'll be happy. If you're constantly focusing on like how to balance things, don't think of more of this or less of this, just balance. If you focus on the balance, not the more, not the less, everything's going to be a little bit easier. Does that make sense?